Who is the prisoner in Castle Meinster?
Why is he chained up in his room?
And what big bats you have?
These and other questions will be answered in this week's
It's Frenzy Frights.
Welcome to Frenzy Frights, a horror movie review show. My name is Gerry.
And I'm Chris.
And we are your hosts.
On Frenzy Frights, we're going to talk about horror movies, monster movies, creature features, and spook shows of all sorts.
Chris, what movie are we talking about today?
Thank you, Prof. Dying to get into this one. This is Brides of Dracula, directed by Terrence Fisher. Screenplay was by Jimmy Sangster, Peter Bryan, and Edward Percy. Uncredited, we had Anthony Hines. This was based on Dr. Van Helsing by Bram Stoker. The production company was, of course, Hammer Films. This was distributed by Rank Film Distributors in the UK, but in the US it was Universal International. This was released on June 15, 1960 in the United States, and it had a running time of 85 minutes. For our cast, we had the great Peter Cushing as Dr. Van Helsing, Yvonne Muller as Marianne, David Peel as Baron Meinster, Martita Hunt as Baroness Meinster, Frida Jackson as Greta, fantastic. Yeah. Miles Mallison as Dr. Tobler, Henry Oscar as Herr Lang, Mona Washburn as Frau Lang, and Andrea Melli, I hope I got the pronunciation correctly, as Gina. Fantastic cast. Prof, Can you please give us a brief synopsis of this movie, and then we will follow up with our own thoughts.
You bet. So I'm going to spoil the movie right now, so please watch the movie before listening and watching, and then let us know what you think and what we might have missed or got wrong. The only real trigger alerts here is, generic vampiric assault, so it's pretty good. The movie begins with a Hammer film production type in red drippy font over a creepy castle alone atop a hill. Spooky. A narrator helpfully gives us a travelogue of Transylvania, the good, the bad, and the bloody. On your left, Dracula, monarch of all vampires, is dead. On your right, all the vampires he created are still around, don't you know? We meet a young schoolteacher, Marianne Danielle, traveling in a coach with a stowaway spy from Baroness Meinster, the dame of the nearby Castle Meinster. Marianne is traveling alone to her new school for ladies, where she will be a student teacher. On the way, the carriage stops in a town so she can get something to eat at an inn. While she eats, the spy pays the cabbie to take off without Marianne, stranding her in town. The townspeople all realize this unaccompanied young lady has been targeted by some devilish force that they presumably know something about, and they bravely begin to clear out of the inn. The tavern keeper tries to get her to either get out of town ASAP or maybe sleep there. We don't have a room, but maybe we can get a cot, blah, blah, blah. But Baroness Meinster arrives, and she sits with Marianne. Wine, she orders. She can drink wine. The Baroness hears about the stranding in town and invites Marianne to come up to Castle Meinster for the night, and she can get her to her new job in the morning. What a great idea. She agrees, despite everyone else, including the soundtrack, realizing that this is a terrible idea. At Castle Meinster, Marianne meets the housekeeper Greta and is shown to her rooms. And on the balcony, she sees a young man in rooms below, and he looks like he's maybe stuck down there. She has an uncomfortable dinner with the Baroness. I don't drink soup, she says. Wine is fine, soup not so much. Marianne asks about the young man she saw, and the Baroness says that it is her insane son. He has to be chained up because he's dangerous. But later that night, Marianne sees him, and boy, he kind of looks fine to her, so let's ignore those people who actually know what's going on and take action. She arranges to get the key to his chains, and he frees himself. Does Marianne expect to dance the night away? Who knows? When the Baroness finds out, she freaks, and Greta loses her mind. Is Greta happy or sad, or a little bit of both? Anyway, she has an eruption. The Baron confronts his mother. "Mother, come here," he says. She does. Marianne does some castle parkour and ultimately finds out the Baroness has been killed. She freaks out and runs out of the castle into the woods. She's running from the devil, and she collapses on the road. In the morning, a carriage discovers Marianne collapsed on the side of the road. Luckily, this carriage carries Dr. Van Helsing. We don't get a first name. Usually it's Abraham Van Helsing, but sometimes I like to pretend it's Eddie Van Helsing. Anyway, Van Helsing gets Marianne back to the town where the innkeeper and his wife are happily surprised to see her still alive. But it turns out there's been a death of a young woman in town the night before. Surprise, guess who's out? Van Helsing checks the new body and sees the bite marks on her neck. Vampires! This girl can't be buried in consecrated ground. Marianne tells Van Helsing the story of the night before at Castle Meinster. And it turns out Van Helsing is in town researching something called the Cult of the Undead. And we know he means vampires. Van Helsing takes Marianne to her school and vouches for her to the headmaster, Herr Lang, and his wife, Frau Lang. He returns to town and decides to stake the townsgirl who was killed, kind of check out to see if she rises from the dead. And that night, Van Helsing stakes out her grave and sees Greta coaxing her out of the box. The girl climbs out of the grave, but before Van Helsing can stake her, the vampire, Bat Meinsterson, attacks him. He chases the bat off with his medical bag and a cross, but Team Vampire gets away. He goes back to Castle Meinster and finds the Baroness, and she sees that she is now a vampire. And we get a little battle between Van Helsing and the Baron runs away. The Baron visits Marianne's school, proposes marriage to her, and she accepts. He's hot for teacher. Later, she tells fellow student teacher Gina about the marriage to the Baron, and Gina says into the mirror, "I wish it had been me." You're going to get your chance, girl. Bat Meisterson swoops in the room and bites her. Gina is dead. Van Helsing is still at the castle and stakes the Baroness. The Baroness is kind of in on it. It's kind of a consent, non-consent situation. Anyway, back in town later, Van Helsing hears of the student teacher's death and goes to the school. He sees the bite marks on Gina's neck, another vampire. He tells them to lock up her casket and put it in the stable with somebody watching it. They do, and Marianne then tells Van Helsing she's engaged, and her beau is the Baron. Uh-oh, eruption time. Marianne is taking a turn at watching the casket, and the locks fall off the box, and Gina rises with one of the greatest-looking lady vampires ever put on film. Gina tells Marianne that the Baron is waiting for her at the old mill so she can join Team V. Van Helsing arrives, and there's a struggle, but Gina gets away. Van Helsing explains the whole vampire business to Marianne and tells her her new boyfriend is the head vampire. That explains a few things. Van Helsing goes to the old mill, kills Greta, and fights the Baron. The Baron overpowers him, bites him on the neck, and leaves him for dead. But Van Helsing wakes up and puts a hot poker on his neck to cauterize the wound and washes it with holy water. The scar disappears. He's not going to be a vampire. Take 2 communions and call me in the morning. The Baron then tries to bite Marianne in front of Van Helsing, but Van Helsing hits him with holy water, and that's smart. Kind of messes his face up, too. The Baron lights the mill on fire without really thinking it through, and he traps his own dumb stealth briefly, and they all kind of scatter into the yard. But Van Helsing arranges the blades of the windmill to reflect the moon in the shape of a cross, and the shadow falls right on the Baron, killing him. The end. So that's what happens in this fantastic movie. Chris, tell us a little bit about what happens behind the scenes.
Thanks. Excellent summation, Professor.
Oh, thank you. A lot of Van Halen jokes in there, if you caught them.
Yeah, nicely done.
Thank you.
Well, at the time of this recording, I could not find Brides of Dracula on any streaming platform, nor on YouTube. The Universal Monsters channel has aired it this past week, and will air it again the day after this recording. I don't own any physical media of this movie, though I've seen this movie numerous times in the past, probably most recently on Svengoolie, and I know a fair bit of this movie to memory. I did opt to rent this through a cable platform for $3.99 and watched it again in the interest for the podcast.
I have it on Blu-ray.
Good for you. Oh,
It's perfect. Yeah, it looks great.
I would think so. Gotta get that. Gotta get into that myself. Yes. The movie does have a cool trailer on YouTube, and I always try to catch the trailer on YouTube before watching the movies that we cover. The filming for the movie began on January 26, 1960 at Bray Studios, the famous British film production facility. Most of the interior shots were done at Bray. The exterior shooting locations were nearby Black Park and Oakley Court. The scene in which the locks dropped from Gina's coffin was derived from M.R. James' story Count Magnus. Now, after the success of Dracula, aka Horror of Dracula in the United States, Hammer commissioned Jimmy Sangster to write a sequel titled Disciple of Dracula, about an acolyte of the vampire, with Count Dracula himself only making a cameo appearance. Now, Sangster's script was rewritten by Peter Bryan to remove the references to Dracula while adding the character of Van Helsing. The screenplay was then further revised by Edward Percy. Reportedly, Sangster, director Terry Fisher, and Cushing were all involved in the rewrite process. Producer Anthony Hines stated, quote, "My own personal achievement in a film like Brides was always 100%, not because I felt it to be my duty, but because I felt very strongly that the pictures were mine. No doubt, Terry Fisher thought they were his, and Jimmy Sangster thought they belonged to him, and Peter C. always knew they were his." Peter Cushing reprises his role of Dr. Van Helsing from the first film. Christopher Lee was asked to reprise his role of Dracula, but declined as he feared typecasting, though he would go on to play the part again in the next film series, Dracula Prince of Darkness. David Peel was cast as the replacement character of Baron Meinster. Miles Malleson, who played The Undertaker in the first film, appeared in a different role as Dr. Tobler. Now, this was directed by Terence Fisher, who already had a long list of credits before he took on this project. His first Gothic horror film was The Curse of Frankenstein in 1957, which launched Hammer's association with the genre and made British actors Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee leading horror stars of the era. He went on to direct several film adaptations of classic horror subjects, including Dracula, aka Horror of Dracula, The Mummy in 1959, Curse of the Werewolf in 1961. He also did The Gorgon, Dracula Prince of Darkness, Island of Terror, Frankenstein Created Woman, Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed, and Frankenstein and the Monsters from Hell. Now, the screenplay was co-credited to Jimmy Sangster. Now, he's Welsh, and he began his career in films at age 16 as a clapper boy. Now, he also wrote The Curse of Frankenstein, Horror of Dracula, The Revenge of Frankenstein, The Crawling Eye, The Mummy from 1959, Who Slew Auntie Roo, the TV movie Scream Pretty Peggy, and he also has credits on 2 episodes of Kolchak the Night Stalker. Horror in the Heights, maybe arguably the best of the series, one of my personal favorites, and Mr. Ring, that was the one with the robot. Oh, yeah. He did 3 episodes of the TV series Wonder Woman, The Feminine Mystique, parts 1 and 2.
My favorite.
I think, yes, and Wonder Woman in Hollywood. Now, all of those episodes featured Drusilla/Wonder Girl, the character played by Deborah Winger, and he has a ton of other movie and TV credits. Let's talk about the cast. We talked about the great Peter Cushing before on our podcast. Now, he's done TV and theater and has appeared in over 100 films. Now, here he's Van Helsing. His other Hammer credits include, let's give a list here, The Curse of Frankenstein, The Abominable Snowman, Dracula, a.k.a. Horror of Dracula, The Revenge of Frankenstein, The Hound of the Baskervilles, The Mummy, The Brides of Dracula, Sword of Sherwood Forest, Cash on Demand, Captain Clegg, The Evil of Frankenstein, The Gorgon, She, Frankenstein Created Woman, Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed, and in the 1970s, The Vampire Lovers, Twins of Evil, which we previously covered, Dracula A.D. 1972, Fear in the Night, The Satanic Rites of Dracula, Frankenstein and the Monster from Hell, Shatter, and The Legend of the 7 Golden Vampires. We had Yvonne Molnar, the French actress who played Marianne here. She also appeared in The Terror of the Tongs with Christopher Lee. David Peel, who played the Count, attended the Royal Academy of Art. He also appeared in the film The Hands of Dr. Orlac, but after that he retired and he became an estate agent and an antiques dealer. Martina Hunt, who played the Baroness/Mother, may best be remembered for her performance as Miss Havisham in David Lean's Great Expectations years earlier.
Yeah.
Perfect. Just absolutely perfect in that. Frida Jackson, who played Greta, had an extensive acting career before this movie, but after this, she would go on to be in Tom Jones, Die Monster Die, Valley of the Guanji, and in The Clash of the Titans, which was her final film role as a Stygian witch. Wow. Miles Malleson, who played Dr. Tobler, had a lengthy career as a, quote, that guy, mostly in comedy relief roles. He also appeared in Horror of Dracula and in The Phantom of the Opera. Andrea Malley, who played Gina in this, played on BBC television Joan of Arc and Jo March in Little Women, and the first white woman who played opposite a black man in a romantic drama in the West End, Hot Summer Night. She also played a lesbian lead in The Killing of Sister George, also in the West End, in keeping with her unusual roles. Now, there was some additional trivia on the film per IMDb. The prop department put a lot of effort into making a realistic model bat, but it was lost, and it had to be replaced on short notice. It explains the unconvincing model bat in this movie. Dr. Van Helsing's got a medical bag, and it bears the initials JVH. His first name is never mentioned, but in the novel Dracula, Van Helsing's first name is actually Abraham. The front doors of Oakley Court served as the main entrance of the Minster Castle. Oakley Court has been featured in a number of classic horror films, including The Curse of Frankenstein, The Horror of Dracula, The Evil of Frankenstein, Die Monster Die, and in the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Yeah. Besides Peter Cushing, Miles Malleson is the only other actor to appear both in this film and in Horror of Dracula. For the film's climax, Peter Cushing and director Terence Fisher had a difference of opinion on how the climax should be done. The actor wasn't happy about the idea of Van Helsing using powers of black magic in order to destroy Baron Meinster. Cushing explained that went against everything his character represented. The ending was to have originally had the vampires destroyed by a swarm of bats. The ending proved too expensive to stage and to shoot. The concept of this particular ending in this film was recycled 3 years later for the climax of Hammer's The Kiss of the Vampire in 1963. With respect to the reviews, Variety called the film, quote, technically well-made, but thought the script adds little to the Dracula legend and follows formula horror gimmicks. And that, quote, it would have been considerably more scary if it had been filmed in old-fashioned black and white. And I have to personally jump in and say I totally disagree. But
yeah, I do too.
Thank you. Harrison Reports wrote that Martita Hunt and Frida Jackson were, quote, excellent in the film. I concur. And the direction of the photography was first class, but that it was not overly frightening. The Radio Times Guide to Films gave the film 4 out of 5 stars, writing, quote, while Christopher Lee worried about typecasting, Hammer went ahead anyway with a sequel, in name only, to its huge 1958 hit Dracula, aka Horror of Dracula. Anemic David Peel, as Baron Meinster, is a poor substitute for Lee's more full-blooded undead Count. But that's the only point of contention on the classic Terence Fisher-directed shocker. The marvelous atmosphere drips with a lingering Gothic ghoulishness. The sexuality is remarkably upfront of its time, and the climax set in the shadow of a moonlit windmill is the stuff of fairy tale nightmare. Leslie Hallowell said, quote, the best of the Hammer Draculas with plenty of inventive action, some classy acting, and a good sense of place and period. The Brides of Dracula holds a score of 79% on Rotten Tomatoes based on 19 reviews with the critics and 62% with the audience. And despite the title of the film, there is no person named Dracula in the movie.
Huh.
How about that? So,
What do you know?
What do you know? We both caught this and we both recently saw it. This is the part of the podcast where we're going to lay out our initial reactions to the film. So I yield the floor to you, and I'm dying to hear what your vampire rules are in this particular movie.
You bet. Okay, so vampires can only go out at night. That's the first vampire rule, so that holds. Vampires drink blood, and they turn their victims into vampires. That's pretty normal. Crosses work against them, but even shadows of crosses will kill a vampire, apparently. They cast no reflection in a mirror, which is kind of played up a couple of times. Staking or burning will kill a vampire, and they have hypno eyes. They can kind of hypnotize you, and they can also transform into bats. So those are kind of some of the rules that we got here. My one thing that kind of I had to really watch and figure out what was going on here. So what's happening with the Baroness? So basically, the Baroness Meinster has people out in the town, in the area, looking for unaccompanied young women that she can bring back to the castle and feed to her son, right? She doesn't want her son going out all over the countryside killing people, so she's got him shackled, but she's got to feed him. So that's how she finds women to feed him, to feed to him. How much of this situation does the town know or guess? I'm not really sure. They know something bad is happening, and they are surprised in a bad way when they realize that the Baron is still alive. But they're still worried about, when the Baroness comes to town, and everybody bugs out, and, they know something's up. So I'm not really sure how much exactly they know, but they definitely know there's vampires around. One thing, Herr Lang, he is just the worst. And I know he's done here for a little bit of humor and everything. He's kind of comic relief, but, he terrifies his wife. He terrifies the young girls. He's really angry and strict and how smart he is and how everybody around him has to be adult and strong and all this stuff. But when he realizes that Van Helsing is prominent, or when he realizes Marianne's fiance is the Baron, he starts kissing their butts. And I mean, I get the comic relief part, but when you have a character that's kissing up and punching down, it's just kind of the worst kind of coward. And I really disliked him, even though he's kind of presented as, fine and just kind of funny and silly. I also found that whenever there's a cross or holy water or Van Helsing is doing something noble, there's this holy music, like you're in church or something. And I thought that was a great, a little heavy-handed, but, here we are. A big question I had one of the things that I really had trouble getting my mind around is that when Marianne leaves the castle, because the Baron clearly killed his own mother, but the next day she seems to have forgotten all that, and she's happy to see him, and she agrees to marry him. And what? Really? Okay. I mean, she was terrified of him, less than 24 hours ago, but now she's getting married. So there you go. Another thing that really bothered me is that we are left with potentially 3 vampires still on the loose when this movie ends. I don't think Gina gets killed. That townsgirl is still a vampire and running around. And there was a guy that when that was watching over the casket at the stable, and he got attacked by a bat and he ended up dead. He might be a vampire too. So, when this movie ends, I felt like this movie is not over, and my ADHD starts acting up with these unresolved plot points. So I guess the Brides of Dracula, are Marianne, Gina, and the townsgirl, and not Greta or the Baroness, I assume. So I think the 3 young women that are quote unquote the brides, I believe they all survived this movie. And my last initial reaction is Baron Meinster is a terrible name. It's like Meinster is like, you're a brewmeister, and, like that. And just calling somebody Baron Meinster, just in retrospect, just seems funny. Vamp Meinster. I don't know. So, Chris, what are some of your initial reactions of The Brides of Dracula?
Prof, great stuff. I have to totally applaud you. I thought you really covered a lot of bases. Some of the stuff you had, I didn't put physically in my notes, but I made a mental note of it, and I was kicking myself because you really crystallized a lot of things, and some of the things I want to circle back to. So I'm glad you put some of the stuff out in front of it. Yeah, for my items, I had the following. I love the font lettering in the opening title credits. This is great stuff. Now, this is jagged red lettering, bordered in white and then in black, and it's just perfect. I really love that. In the opening, of course, we have this harried, treacherous, arduous stagecoach ride with Marianne, and the route is blocked by a log. And I love that the stagecoach driver gets out of the cab and he says, "Oh, there's nothing to be afraid of." But then, unseen to her, he makes the sign of the cross really quick as he approaches this log to get it out of the way. I just love that little movement. And I love how it was executed. Perfect stuff there.
I do have a question about that. Mm-hmm. When you say he makes the sign of the cross, I was raised Catholic. I was always under the impression that the sign of the cross was a Catholic thing and didn't really, Protestant people didn't do that as often.
Good catch. Good catch.
And they seem to be doing it all over the place in this movie. And it's made by English people or British people. So I'm not sure where that comes from. And they called the priest father too.
Yes.
And I thought that was a little odd at one point. The Protestant versus Catholic kind of situation is kind of getting a little muddled here for me.
Good catch. And I didn't see that point ever raised in any of the trivia or any of the anachronisms in IMDb with respect to that, or anything which could be perceived as a goof or trivia otherwise. I think that's a fantastic catch, Prof. Good stuff there. Yeah, like you, I was raised Catholic myself, and I didn't catch it. I wasn't on to it as you. I'm thinking, well, couldn't hurt. So,
Yeah, couldn't hurt.
couldn't hurt. So let's go ahead and do this. So we arrive at the tavern, and every tavern, I love it, has a peculiar name. And here it's the Running Boar. Why, I don't know. Now, we didn't see any livestock when the stagecoach arrived, but so be it. But here we're at the tavern's the Running Boar, and they have a fairly decent menu with whatever and sauerkraut and some wine. On the onset, I really like Mary Ann. She's got this soft, demure French accent. She's got huge eyes that are very, very expressive. And periodically, I was kind of freeze framing the movie as we went along. And I was just so taken aback by when I froze the picture, everyone is totally in character, and everyone, particularly the females of the cast, were just so expressive with their eyes and facial expressions. It was really, really good stuff here. I mean, somebody could have had a field day if they're going to make lobby cards out of this, because there are so many scenes that capture just moments. I mean, everybody is spot on, and the acting is fluid and continuous throughout this whole thing. One of the things I had in my notes, there's a scene where Mary Ann goes to a window and she looks out and peers over a ledge, and across the way and down another level, then we see the Baron, and he's chained. Now, she has to go find a key. She finds it. Now, how the Baron knows where the key is, that's one thing. I don't think I would have revealed to the Baron where I knew where the key was. But she wraps it in a handkerchief and she tosses it. And I thought, wow. I'm not sure many people could make that toss, but she did so with pretty nice accuracy, considering the perilous drop that he could have made all the way down to who knows where, because this seemed to have a bottomless pit, if you will, because we really don't see where the floor is of this. But I thought, hey, Mary Ann, you could throw. Good for you. As I'm watching this is a gorgeous print of the movie. And every time I've seen this movie, the colors always pop. I've seen this film numerous times, going back from the course of my childhood all the way to the present. And I don't think I've ever seen a bad print of this film at all. I mean, I just am totally blown away with how this film holds up with the prints and the colors. It's great stuff here. As a little personal aside, we've got Greta, and she's this old, haggard woman with a hair pulled back, and she just relishes this role. Frida's fantastic in this. Okay. And she sort of looked to me sort of kind of like Match Game panelist / actress Brett Summers from back in the day to me, with sort of a whiff of Cloris Leachman's Frau character thrown in there. Yeah. Just a great look for Greta, and just how she plays it. I mean, this looks like a Greta. This is a real thing with a Greta. Just thing here too. Prof, yeah, you alluded to this, and you fleshed out your point more than I did, but you did catch something here. When we go into the finishing school and we get this nasty headmaster, suddenly Von Helsing shows up and he presents his card. And boy, does this guy do a 180. Oh, look at this. You're doctor of this. Look at this. Oh, I doff my cap to you, sir. Yes, what can I do for you, sir? What honor can I do for you, sir? Just by showing the card. Wow. It sort of reminded me of those old Telly Savalas Players Co-op commercials. Hey, baby, check out my card. Oh, right this way, Mr. Savalas. You know, you get the best table in the house, Mr. Savalas. Here we go. You just, all by presenting the card, boom, you get all this clout, and all of these perks are thrust upon you. Just, I love that. One little minor point, and we get to the climax of the film. And we get this confrontation in somewhat of this barn area, and there's a lot of hay on the floor, and we get this confrontation. And then suddenly the Baron kicks over this brazier, and it doesn't even take just like a millisecond for boom, all of this hay to go up, almost like from one end of the frame to the other. This place is ablaze in a hurry just after one mere kick. Oh my gosh. So those were some of the initial reactions as I was piecing this together in my mind. But we've got quite a bit to cover here with our respective favorite movie moments. So, Prof, why don't we dive in right away and get to it? Prof, what were some of your favorite moments of this film?
Well, I think this opening sequence with Marianne arriving at the tavern, meeting the Baroness, going to the castle, and running away, it's one of the best, most efficient setups of any horror movie. I think this thing, the first 15, 20 minutes of this movie is a roller coaster ride, and you're just brought along with it. And it's just fantastic. It just feels great, and you really understand. You have a really good setup of the world that we're living in. I loved it, and Peter Cushing, who is just on many people, including my Mount Rushmore of horror actors. He is so good in his action scenes in this movie. He's a little restrained otherwise, but in his fight scenes, he is one of the greatest physical actors ever. He gets hit by Dracula. He goes by Meinster. He goes flying, hits the table, which looked like it hurt, and he falls to the floor. And then later at the end, he's up on a platform like a deck, and he jumps off the deck onto the ground. And that's really Peter Cushing. You see his face the whole time, and there's no CGI, there's no AI. There's just a really good actor that has fantastic physical skills. He's the best. Peter Cushing is great as always in this movie. When Marianne is going to get the key to the shackles, she goes out the window and she goes on a vine covered like sill outside, and it's one of these like she's creeping along outside the castle. It's just that whole sequence of her getting the key and all that stuff. It's just very tense and exciting. Is she going to get caught? Is she going to fall? All that stuff. And then finally, I wanted to point out the comic relief of Dr. Tobin. So he's a hypochondriac. He's always taking, I might have this problem. And he takes a root or an herb for whatever ailment he imagines he may have. And he always kind of chases it down with some brandy or whatever. So you wonder what his real reason for taking these medicines are. He probably just to take the brandy. Now, the thing I really liked about this is I think this movie really does comic relief correct. He doesn't arrive until an hour into the movie, which I think is perfect. This movie has settled into a little groove. But, before, in Act 2, a lot of times a movie can bog down. And here we go with a comic character that helps things bounce along a little bit. I think a comedy in horror movies is a very dicey subject. Sometimes it works, sometimes it makes a movie, and sometimes it's just a disaster. But here, I think this is as good as it gets. Dr. Tobin is hysterical. How about you, Chris? What are some of your favorite movie moments?
Prof, as I saw this, I couldn't help but go back to watching it for the first time as a kid. And just even the opening, you see the Universal International opening, and it's Universal International, and it's that typical slanted font that you see with the color globe slowly rotating, the giant globe rotating. And then, boom, we do a smash cut to a Hammer film production. I go, what is this? I didn't know where we were as a child when I saw this for the first time. Is this American? What is Hammer? Is this British? What is this? This was one of my all-time favorite openings in a horror movie. Some of the little details that I caught that I thought were kind of amusing, at least to me, was when the Baroness enters the tavern. And as soon as she does so, she, without batting an eye, she says, "Wine," as she enters the tavern. And that kind of threw me off for a little bit, because how many vampire movies have we seen where "I don't drink wine" was the line, but now she says wine, and I just love it. I think this is sort of like, okay, we're going to go a different way with this. And I think it was a very deliberate part in the script and a nice deliberate action, and I just love how it was totally executed there.
She does say she doesn't drink soup.
Yes.
So
right.
Wine's fine. Soup, not so much.
Wine is fine. I said it earlier. I'll say it again. A lot of acting with the eyes. I particularly credited it with the women of the cast, but the men too. But spot on with the females of the cast. Good stuff here. There is another line when we get towards about a third of the way in. And this movie is nicely divided by half-hour moments, too. I think there's like a definitive Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 in this. And they kind of roll around at the 30-minute mark as I was stopping and checking things with my notes. A line is said to the Baroness, "God bless you," before parting. And the Baroness mother just waits a beat and says, "If only he could." Great writing, great delivery. I love how that was executed. Good stuff here. The hairstyles and the costumes in this movie, wow, big budget. And they were just spot on perfect in my opinion. But as I'm writing these heaps of praise in my notes, I did catch one thing. Now, the men in this one who have the mutton chops, the long sideburns, I couldn't help but notice they didn't seem to match the flow of the men's actual hair. And to me, they kind of appeared glued on. Now, if I'm wrong, and if these were authentic mutton chops for the men, more power to the men to keeping it authentic. But I thought the mutton chops just didn't quite seem authentic to me. I could be mistaken, but the set pieces, my gosh, were amazing. Just so many candles. We enter a room and there's like a big book on a stand, like on a lectern, and just chairs and hallways and balconies, and just great stuff here. Everything is just 10 out of 10. I mean, let's do it up with all those set pieces and notch it up to the next level. Really good stuff here.
Oh yeah.
I've seen this movie many times, and I think I have a Mandela effect with this film because I thought that Gina, who's the dark-haired gal in this, was an active vampire for at least half of this movie, or even at least a third of the movie. But we don't see her actually as a vampire until we get to the final 13 minutes of the film. I was kind of dumbfounded by that, and I was catching it. For me, I'm wondering why this is, and I'm trying to think to myself, why am I misremembering it? And for the only conclusion I could come up with was, I think that her smile with the fangs, to me personally, is just such an iconic horror movie moment. Just that she relishes and just has this creepy smile. And whenever you think of Brides of Dracula, I can't help but always think to her first. There is a bit where the Baron is choking out Van Helsing, and it's with a chain, and it kind of lingers a bit. And there's a moment where Cushing sticks out his tongue like, ah, and I kind of laugh like that. And how cool is that? I don't remember, would people acted like they were getting choked out. Yeah, you would stick out your tongue. And I just, you don't see that when people get choked out nowadays in movies, but here's Cushing. He's full throttle. He's going 10 out of 10. He is owning this moment. He's sticking out his tongue when he's being choked with this chain. But I have to say, the other thing I had in my notes, Cushing is a beast in this movie. He totally exudes confidence just with his suaveness. And I'll get more into that a little bit later with my closing thoughts, but Cushing was just marvelous in this movie. So, Prof, this is the part of the podcast where we're going to pick it apart a little bit more and a little bit deeper with some discussion questions. And so I yield the floor to you. Where would you like to start?
All right. So Brides of Dracula is a Dracula movie without Dracula. Does that work? Do you like Baron Meinster as the kind of new Dracula? He's very different than what we're used to. Do you think Meinster is an underrated movie vampire, or is it fine? He's fine for this movie and it just works and don't worry about it.
Prof, when I saw this as a kid, I thought this was totally breaking convention.
Yeah.
Dracula is Bela Lugosi or should have dark hair. This guy is blonde, and I think a blonde hairpiece was worn for the actor to put this on with. And, I have to say, he almost kind of looked like too good looking. David Peel. I mean, he is just a handsome man. And he doesn't look sinister until we see his eyes and that creepy smile. And I thought, wow, this is unlike a vampire I've seen before. And I'll get to it in my closing thoughts as well. But then we see the women here as well, and they're just relishing being vampires, yet they're these beautiful women, and they just start owning it. And they go, wow, how creepy is this? As a man, you're talking, well, I'll never hit a lady, but how's Cushing going to take out these pretty women who are vampires? I don't know where this is going to go. So for me, I was blown away by it sort of breaking what I thought was standard tradition. Vampire has always got to be Dracula. He always has to have dark hair. He has to have the look of a count and everything with Regal. No. I mean, props to them for coming up with something that I thought was just totally unique and kind of weird and kind of creepy for me as a kid watching this for the first time in the early 70s. But this was breaking convention. I thought this was kind of cool. I bought it and I thought, wow, yeah, let's own this thing a little bit there. And I have to say, I don't know why David Peel didn't do any more, but I thought he was kind of convincing. He had that charm. He had that masculine good looks. And yeah, it totally worked for me with respect to that. Prof, how about you?
Yeah, I thought definitely Baron Meinster worked pretty well for me. So Meinster is charming and slick and kind of romantic, but still manipulative, but in a very calm and understated kind of, left-handed kind of way. He is not the feral vampire of Bela Lugosi or Christopher Lee, who were dangerous and aggressive, and you just got the creeps from them right away. Now, I think this works great as the plot is developing, as he's seducing or, getting Marianne to fall in love with him. And, it works great in those pieces. But I thought in the final confrontation, this kind of weak, kind of sneaky vampire really didn't have the danger feel. Like, now Van Helsing is in trouble. And it's not to say that he's not terrifying, because in his own way he is. Like when he confronts his mother and he says, "Mother, come here." He says it in a way that is absolutely chilling, but in a restrained way, and that makes it worse. So like I said, it works during the movie, but at the end there's a lot of problems with the end, in my opinion. And I do see why some of the reviews at the time were saying, because think 1960, you're used to Bela, you're used to Christopher Lee. It's a certain kind of vampire. A lot of those movies are more effective in moody black and white. Whereas, at the time, the color may have seemed a little like, oh, this isn't a Gothic horror movie. This is in color. And I understand why at the time the feeling may have been a certain way towards this movie. But I think now, where we've seen so many different vampires and we've seen, so many different approaches to vampirism, that I think it works great. And I think it was, they didn't realize where the whole vampire shtick was going to go as they went forward. So I think this completely works for me to a modern audience. We've talked a lot in other vampire movies that we've reviewed that vampirism tends to be a kind of a stand-in for other societal ills and bad behavior. What do you think about what that means here? What is this movie trying to say about vampirism? Did you get any kind of themes that came to your mind?
Well, it's weird, Prof, because I think when we see the Vela vampire, he poses as a count of somebody with dignity and who should be respected here. I don't get that vibe so much with this particular clan, if you will, and I don't know why it sort of didn't lean into that a little bit more. Yeah, Prof, I think that you're onto something with respect to this, because there is an abusiveness that they felt, and I think a little bit of entitlement as well with some social structure. But I just don't think that took another step forward. And I think it could have dared to go just a little bit to explore it, but it was a little bit more restrained. Prof, what were you thinking here?
Yeah, I think you're onto something there. So the Baron, we got a little bit of a backstory from, I think, Greta and the Baron's mother. The Baron, he and his mother and the Baroness came to this house when the Baron was a little kid, and the Baroness kind of, overindulged him, and he got into bad behavior and getting into kind of filthy, nasty stuff. And the mother didn't stop. The Baroness didn't stop him. And maybe she and Greta, there were even hints that they were involved in some ways. And then apparently one of his friends of a friend was Count Dracula. So Count Dracula came to Castle Meinster for a party and, apparently vampirized the Baron. I like the Count. Definitely, I believe counts outrank barons. So, Count Dracula was the leader, and the Baron, he was outranked. Vampires, what it seems to me to be here, and I think this is similar to what it was with Bela. It seems to be a stand-in for the abuse that rich and powerful people can get away with on regular folk, right? So, Baron Meinster is just going out and eating all the local girls. And that just seems to be the thing and nobody can do anything about it. It reminds me very much about, Twins of Evil, where Peter Cushing, again's character, was able to kill suspected witches. But when he realized that the guy in the castle, whatever he was, Count of the castle, was the vampire, he kind of chickened out. He wasn't able to do what needed to be done to kill him because, he was rich and powerful. So I think that there is a little bit of element there in a lot of vampire movies, that vampirism can also be rich against poor and powerful against weak. And I think that works in this movie. But that being said, I wanted to talk about the ending with the windmill and the whole thing at the old mill. Does this ending work for you, Chris?
Prof, I think it's an excellent question. I will give it a mild yes, but not an overconfident yes, if that makes any sense. I've got more of an issue with something I'll circle back to before I posit the question to you. I think it makes for a big spectacle. And I couldn't help but be reminded of the Kolchak the Night Stalker episode Vampire, where I think Carl lights the giant cross ablaze.
Oh, yeah.
and wow, how big and bombastic was that, just the way that scene happened. I think you've got a set piece, and I think, the powers that be wanted to go one way with respect to the bats, but then somebody said, hey, we've got this windmill. Oh, look, it kind of makes a cross, kind of, sort of. Let's go this way and lean into it with that. So I was okay with it. I will kind of concede if anybody had any quibbles with it, I will grant you that. But Prof, I want you to answer the question as well. But one question I had for you was, did one part of the movie work for you? And it's this. When Cushing is bitten, he's got bite marks on his neck. So then he does the bit where he puts some holy water on it and he cauterizes it or puts the holy water on it. I forget the order of which, but then we see it vanish. And do you think, does that work for you, ridding yourself of vampirism? So first up, did you buy the ending with the windmill? And second, did you buy the holy water cauterization effect for ridding yourself or in essence, curing yourself of vampirism?
Well, if I ever get bit by a vampire, I'll sure try it. But I thought it was thrilling. Like, it was really cool seeing him do it. Do I really think in my, fantasy world of vampires that would actually work? I don't know. But it was really cool seeing Peter Cushing doing it, heating up the poker or whatever it was and then hitting himself in the neck with it. I thought it was fantastic. I thought there's a lot going on at the end, and some of it was clumsy. One of the things about this movie is you had a couple of sets. You had the village, and you had the castle, and you had the school, and it seemed like there was a lot of moving characters around. So that you could set up scenes. And it's like, oh, I'm going to go to the school. Oh, I'm going to go to this place. Oh, I'm going to go to the castle. And people bouncing around like that. And I think that kind of, it's like a tile game happened at the end, too, where you have vampires coming in and vampires going out and these people fighting and these people running away. And so it's a little confusing at the end. I think between the cauterizing the wound and the using the shadow of the windmill to be a cross, and that killing the vampire, I think those are two. They're pretty weak. I mean, I realize this isn't a physics class, and we're not sitting here like, what is really the way to kill a vampire? That would never work because it's all made up. But even so, that seems like a little bit of a stretch to me. Does it seem like a stretch to you to be able to kill vampires with a shadow?
Yes.
Yeah.
Isn't as much as this movie, I kind of have to grudgingly have to concede the point. But yeah, I have to do. I agree. Yes.
Yeah.
Prof, this is sort of leaning into some of the things we are kind of questioning, and I think it kind of is pain points because I sense we both love this film a lot.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, we can't help but address some of the things that are head scratchers here. And one of mine, I had a couple. First off, I'll posit this to you. Why do you think Greta was so loyal to the Baron? What's in it for her? And me, does she just like to be mean? What do you think is going on with this character here?
Well, I noticed that when he was freed, when Baron Meinster was freed, Greta went to the Baroness, and I think she was dead, and said, "Oh, I kept my pledge. I didn't free him myself. It wasn't me. It wasn't me." And so for some reason, she pledged to the Baroness to keep the Baron shackled. And for whatever reason, she was kind of held herself to that pledge. And when he was freed, she was free of her pledge, right? So I think all along she had been under the influence of the Baron. And when he was freed, she kind of cracked in her head. And she became like, if you think of her as a Renfield character, you remember the times where Renfield was like trying to protect Mina. Oh, don't, do this, keep her out of here, get Mina away. But still was committed to the Count as well and was kind of conflicted. And I think Greta has that kind of conflict here. And as good as Dwight Frye was as Renfield, Greta here is amazing. When she has her breakdown, she has a breakdown. That was some hot acting right there. Great work. So I am, of course, inclined to go along with it because of just how good an actress she is. But I think that maybe she was involved with some of the shenanigans that were going on back in the old days, and the Baron kind of hypnotized her or compelled her to be his Renfield. So I think that's a lot what's going on here. How about you, Chris? What do you think?
Yeah, Prof, I can't top what you just said. I thought that it was an excellent answer, and I kind of cheated when I saw your answer written in the script. I thought, my God, a chef's kiss, Prof. You just nailed it. Now, you put it more eloquently than I could have possibly done. But I do want to circle back to something that you had said early on that you alluded to, and here we go again. Mm-hmm. Marianne sees the Baron kill his mother, but later agrees to marry him. Now, we have to think, at least I think, that this irrationality is attributed to her being hypnotized, but do you buy how this scene played out with no perceptible act of hypnosis nor any resistance from Marianne? You went somewhere with this, and it was bothering me too. Any other feelings with respect to the scene?
Yeah, it's definitely a plot hole, I think. I realize she has to say yes for the sake of the plot to move forward, but I think it doesn't work. I think the script is hoping that we're going to forget what Marianne went through and then move forward, Yeah, it's.
I'm so glad you said it though early on, because I was thinking, is this just me or
No.
is this? Yeah, okay, thank you.
And then my other quibble on this too is that all the brides of Dracula get away,
Right.
and it's completely not brought up. Not like
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, that's all good. But saying those negative things about this movie, are you able to figure out some kind of way to score it?
Yeah, Prof. I mean, I have to admit it. I'm really biased here. If I was going to be critical, I'd go one way, but I can't, because I have to admit to the listeners, I have a lot of personal biases here. Brides of Dracula was the first Hammer movie that I can ever remember seeing. Now, if I separated myself from those nostalgic memories, and if I'm really, really hypercritical, I probably, giving it some allowances, I'd probably go B, not B plus, not B minus, but a solid B.
Mm-hmm.
But hey, I can't do that. I have to include my personal biases. Brides of Dracula exposed me to Hammer for the first time. It exposed me to Gothic horror on a huge scope, more so than TV's Dark Shadows did for me. Aside from like an Aurora model kit ad I saw in a comic book, this was like the first live action exposure to female vampires that I ever saw. This was really ultra creepy, seeing these women in their love and in their passion for being vampires, running around in nightgowns and putting on creepy smiles on their face. And they're just so over the top with relish. Despite what little they had to do, I was genuinely scared of them. And here in this movie, we have the Baron. And he's a guy with blonde hair that's a vampire. And that blew me away as a kid. What? This guy doesn't look like a vampire at all, but he's a vampire. This guy looked more like a Ken doll than a vampire to me. Wow. When things sort of come at you in certain times of your life, even though they've existed for many years beforehand. And this is one of those moments where Brides of Dracula came at me when I was a little kid. And seeing it as a kid, this is a movie that to me broke so many conventions and tropes in my mind as to what a vampire could look like. And as if on cue, in my lifetime when I saw this is suddenly Blackula was hitting the theaters. Wow, how cool is that? Yeah. Check that out. So this is like, wow, vampires can be any color. Here we go. Yeah. The vampires in this movie, you had some women and you had some men. And if you were just to sort of like not know who they were, just show pictures of them, you think, oh, this is the hero of the movie and those are the heroines of the movie. But no, scratch that. These are the villains in this movie. Yeah. This is Cushing. You know, you could show that's a picture of Cushing. Oh, he must be the bad guy. No. If you just erase what the photographs of what these people look like, we're gonna bend it a little bit. The characters with the hero and heroine looks, no, they're the vampires. Cushing is the good guy in this one. What? Okay, so here we go. These are vampires, and the women look so pretty, and the guys look so handsome. And to me, they kind of look sexy. And this was before, as a little kid, I could really not understand or fully define what sexy was in my mind. But here we have this movie, and then let's look at Cushing. He's the hero of the movie. He's Van Helsing. And his face is thin, and it's a little gaunt. And he doesn't seem overly muscular, and he's got thinning hair, and he's got a way receding hairline. But yet Peter Cushing has this stage presence, and he has this confidence, and he has this caring as a doctor in some of these scenes where he expresses sympathy at somebody losing their daughter and the death and caring for Mary Ann. And you just see the guy's expertise, and he shows it off, but not in a manner that's snooty. He's a smart guy, and he really showed me that this was the hero who knew exactly what he was doing, and just the gravitas and his presence really gave the character so much credibility. And in my mind, playing it out, I thought, oh, wait, oh yeah, this guy can definitely take out a vampire, and much, much more. And he's not afraid to stake an old lady in the chest with this. But he does so in such a way that it gives her mercy and it puts her at peace. Now, okay, can I take a step back and can I look at Brides of Dracula today and can I say it's got some flaws? Absolutely. Sure. But to me, this movie has too many personal memories attached to it. I have to give it an A. Prof, how about you? What are your thoughts and where do you land on Brides of Dracula?
I think this is a great Peter Cushing movie. He's great as always. He's a little subdued here. He's not over the top, but like you said, you said really well, Chris. He gives this vibe of a totally confident man who knows what's what, knows what he believes in, doesn't care if people don't agree with him. He's just focused and going to get her done. And he is one of the greatest physical actors of all time. Here he's jumping, lunging, bouncing off things. It's really amazing stuff. He's got some of the greatest physical stunts ever and you can see his face. It's him. The opening of this movie is one of the best first, 15, 20, 30 minutes of any horror movie ever. I think this is so tight, the beginning of this movie, the setup. It's fantastic. I do have to give it a decrement for the end. The end and the kill and some of the stuff that happens at the end, while exciting, is a little weak. And we still have vampires running around. So, that's the movie's not over yet. And of course, like we said, Marianne should be terrified of the Baron after she gets away and he comes back to the school to propose. The proposal makes zero sense. Gina, as the vampire, is one of the greatest vampire visuals of all time. I can only imagine how excited the production group was when they saw her in the fangs. They must have been like, oh man, we got a winner here. She looks great. And the funny thing is, my wife has never seen this movie. We've seen a couple of vampire movies, but she's not a big horror movie fan. I showed her the picture of Gina with the fang. She goes, oh yeah, I know that movie. Like, it's very just really compelling, very memorable. But again, I think Brides of Dracula has a terrible ending. So there's a lot of loose ends. There's a lot of twisting vampire lore to fit kind of this story. But it's so entertaining. It's so fun. And you really have to think about some of the problems. Maybe in your first viewing, you're not going to really notice some of these problems. So I have to give Brides of Dracula an A-. I think it's a classic and it has some flaws in it, but I think anybody is going to enjoy Brides of Dracula.
There you have it. So people in the audience, tell us what you think about this movie. Do you like Brides of Dracula? And do you think it works as a vampire movie in the conventional sense? We're dying to hear what you think.
Yeah, tell us. And thank you for checking out Frenzy Frights. Check out our other shows, The Professor Frenzy Show, where we cover indie comics, That Guy in That Show, where we look at great character actors, and our Twilight Zone episode review, where we review Twilight Zone episodes. Thanks for listening and watching.
It's